What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Quill and Hammer Reforging Fiction. I am Trevor. This is Zach. Zach, how we doing today?
We're doing fantastic because today we're going to be telling the world how we can fix The Last Jedi, Episode 8 in the Skywalker saga.
All right. Well, let's dive into it. Your comment already shows your stance on the on the movie.
I mean, it's
Walk me
pretty
through it.
clear.
Walk me through it.
Okay, so here's the problem. We talked last week about The Last Jedi and how it ruined character arcs. It took characters in directions that were illogical and just didn't work, right?
Mhm.
But they at least set up some plot lines. They set up Rey's heritage. Who does she belong to? Is she the secret love child of Obi-Wan and Duchess Satine? Is she somebody else? Who does she belong to? Why is she force sensitive? Why is she so important? The lightsaber of Anakin Skywalker is calling out to her. Why? Is she a relative? Is she a descendant of Anakin Skywalker somehow? Then there was sort of this plot line with Finn, right? He holds the lightsaber and he's, ready to fight Kylo Ren. You have the mystery of Luke being gone for however many years. Nobody's seen him for so long. And what's he doing? He could be, researching Jedi, ancient Jedi texts or whatever, right? Searching for something. But then The Last Jedi basically threw all that away and said, nope, none of it matters. We're retconning it all. And I'm going to make my own movie. That's basically what Ryan Johnson did, right? You have Kylo Ren at the end say, yeah, you're nobody, Rey. Your parents were nobodies. And it's like, okay, well, then why was the lightsaber calling out to her? That was never answered, right? Then you have Finn, who was setting up to be a really good character, but then they immediately turn him back into the coward, right? He was a coward in the first one. He overcomes it for Rey, for friendship, and then he immediately turns into a coward again and tries to run, right? Complete regression of character arc, which not only was it a regression, but it was a regression to the exact same problem. And that's not okay to be doing. It minimizes everything that the character's done so far, right? And then you have Luke, which is probably the most egregious um, problem in The Last Jedi. They completely ruined who Luke was. At the end of Return of the Jedi, Luke was convinced that Darth Vader, the baddest dude on the planet, still had good in him. He was willing to die to prove that Vader still had good in him. But then the second he senses something bad in Kylo Ren, he ignites his lightsaber and considers killing a kid. It's like that is not, it's incongruous with who Luke is. It is completely out of his character. And then he goes off and he pouts. It's like that for 20 years. It's like, no, we're not going to do that. That is not who Luke is. And out of everything, that is the most egregious error. And it's similar to our biggest gripe last week with The Force Awakens was how they treated Han. They completely took his character back, and they're doing the exact same thing with Luke in this film, completely walking him back. And those are things that I just can't get past. And I have more if we have time to talk about it, but those are the big ones. So go ahead and start. giving me your thoughts.
Okay. So if I'm remembering right, gosh, it's early, so I can't guarantee that I will repeat these verbatim, but we're upset at Rey. Like, who is she? Why is the lightsaber calling out to her? That plot point. You have Finn, and then you have Luke. Which to be honest, all right, I can't refute those things at all because those are my same three gripes with the movie. But before we get into that, I don't think it's a bad movie. I don't. I mean, we talked about the bare bones of the movie, and we talk about this quite a bit, right? Where we're like, okay, they are being chased by they're being chased by the First Order, you know. They don't know how it's happening. They realize that they're being tracked, so now they have to get rid of the tracker. So they go on that little side quest, you know. Um, okay, yeah, Luke training Rey, like that whole whatever side of things, that just drives me insane. We need to fix that, period. But the going to Canto Bight, that was fine. Um, I don't even hate the connection between Rey and Kylo. Like that can work. It can be very interesting. Um, Finn and Rose and like all of this happens, and then they make it onto the cruiser, and of course everything goes wrong because that's exactly how it has to happen. You can't just win everything. You get the Phasma closure arc. You get let's see, going through my notes. You get the Kylo killing Snoke and being, the supreme leader, that kind of thing. So you've got that going on. I don't know, like there's not a lot that I would change given the context of the actual bones of the story. Do you remember much about it before we get into your plot points?
I mean, I I still have a problem with um, the whole premise of the First Order is back in full force without explanation, and the Resistance is, a ragtag team. They've got like 100 people left. At least that's how it seems.
Right.
Um, and then the running out of fuel thing, that always sort of bothered me because it's the first time in the series, if I'm remembering correctly, that they have to stop for fuel. You know what I mean? Like, sure, you need to stop and make repairs on your hyperdrive. You need to replace parts on your ship, but it never talks about fuel. And sure, there's probably some necessity for fuel to run these ginormous spaceships, but it was like they were at their base. Presumably, you should be ready to go at any minute. And especially if you have Poe in the opening sequence stalling for time, they should have been able to fill up their cruiser like it should be full, you know? And then they have one light speed jump and they're like, "Oh shiz, we're out of fuel." It's like that doesn't make sense to me. That plot point seems improbable, I'll say. I won't say that it's impossible. I'm not going to say these ships shouldn't have fuel and that can't be a crisis, but it seems very improbable and it feels like you need a reason for them to be stranded in space and to be being chased by the First Order. And so for that reason, it feels more artificial than natural.
Right.
and it's another immersion breaker for me. So as long as we're talking about the bare bones of the plot, that's a little problem that I have. Sure, it's a little nitpicky, but it's still something that it, like I said, it breaks immersion for me. So it's hard for me to look past.
You know, I didn't mind it the second time. To be honest, you and I had this conversation, what, 8 years ago when this movie came out.
Yes.
Um, I didn't mind it. But I don't know, maybe I went in with lowered expectations this time, so I didn't really care. But like, I was able to look past the whole fuel thing because I think being stranded in space or being chased by the First Order and running out of options, like that was an interesting thing. How are they tracking them still through light speed, hyperspace? How are they doing that? Um, so many things outweigh the fuel issue. Now, do I admit that if it were us, we would have found some other way to do it, something, you know, different than the fuel issue? Of course we would have. But I don't mind them being stranded in space. They are trying to get somewhere, but they're being tracked everywhere they go. So it's like, what do they do? Just making endless jumps all the way for the rest of time, trying to outrun this cruiser. There's something that needs to slow them down, whether that's, you know, a, the shield was down and it damaged the engines, and now they're repairing the shield, but the engines can't go or something.
Right.
But I don't mind the idea. So yeah, it's a little nitpicky to me to say we never talked about fuel once. Like, that's true. It is true. As far as I can remember in any of the movies, and, you know, I don't know, I can't remember through any of the TV series, but that doesn't really matter for our discussion. But I don't remember that being talked about at all, like we're out of fuel or whatever, but it doesn't bother me that that's used here because I don't think we should get hung up on that. It's not the best choice, but there needed to be something to cause the conflict. And that's what it was, because without it, yeah, they can track the ship through, hyperspace, but if they don't have some way to slow down, then you're just jumping around the galaxy for no reason.
Okay, sure, fine. I'll I'll concede that it is a little nitpicky, but to your point, I think the engine's being damaged because they broke through the shields is a much better idea than just, oh shoot, we're out of fuel.
Right,
You know, I mean that seems more plausible to me.
right.
But I'll I'll let that point rest. It is a little nitpicky.
Okay. Um, the next point that I wanted to bring up is what were your thoughts on the disabling the tracker bit? Um, they go to Canto Bight, they have that little side quest thing. Um, Rey and everyone they meet on the cruiser. Is there anything you change about that? The kind of, you know, I don't want to say the meat of the story, but the meat of the story.
I mean, it's not a bad way to go. Um, so no, I don't think I necessarily have a problem with the way things happened. I don't mind them being double crossed by what's his name?
Yeah.
The
DJ, I
hacker
believe.
guy. What is it?
I believe his name was DJ.
DJ, that's right. So I don't mind that. Um, again, I don't know. I don't know that it was the most logical choice for a plot point, but it's not a deal breaker for me.
Okay. Now, you and I spoke about Snoke a lot after this movie.
Yes, we did.
Um, Walk me through what you hated about it, because I actually didn't think it was as bad as, again, as I thought it was when we first got there. So I remember we were like, okay, why is Snoke being such an arrogant jerk? Like, he's just laughing, he's doing whatever. Yeah, he's got force powers, but like, he was this mysterious figure in, you know, The Force Awakens, and then he just kind of is over the top, arrogant, and silly a little bit.
Well, I think that's the core of why it bothers me, is because, again, his character is incongruous between The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. You know, in The Force Awakens, he mentions that he's seen the rise and fall of the Empire, and he's older than, who knows? Like you said, he's mysterious. It's like, where does he come from? How does he know these things? How does he know the dark side of the Force? If, we're kind of pulling from Legends material at this point, but it's alluded to in the prequels that there are only ever two Sith, which harkens back to the Darth Bane Legends material where he created the rule of two, only one master and one apprentice. And when the apprentice becomes strong enough to overtake the master, then the master is killed and they find a new apprentice. You know what I mean? And so the big question was, well, is Snoke secretly Palpatine's master? Is he Plagueis? Because, again, in Legends, Palpatine thinks that he kills Plagueis, but there's a question about was Plagueis still alive? There was mystery to it, right? But then you have such an easy death. I have a hard time believing that Snoke could be fooled by Kylo Ren, who is still in training. At the end of The Force Awakens, he calls Kylo back and says, we need to finish your training because you got beaten by a girl type thing, a girl with no training,
Right.
and so that implies that he is not a master, but then he's able to fool Snoke and ignite the other lightsaber. And the thing about this whole movie is the cinematography was spectacular. It's like the visuals were striking and some of these ideas were pretty good, but it just doesn't fit with the previous lore and especially with the movie that came before it. It like threw everything out. It subverted expectations too much to the point that, it's like nothing mattered. The Force Awakens didn't matter at all. It was a completely different film. And so I've kind of gotten off topic here, but Snoke especially was a big problem for me because he was interesting. He was supposed to be this big deal, but then he's immediately killed by Kylo Ren, and it's like doesn't matter. And I guess that's what bothers me the most about the film. Everything that was set up in The Force Awakens, Ryan Johnson decided, nope, that doesn't matter. Nope, doesn't matter. And it just really bothers me. And I don't feel satisfaction from the resolution of Snoke's arc. And then, we'll get into the rise of Skywalker later, but then to find that he's just a failed clone of Palpatine, it's like, oh, come on, man. That's the best you could do. So those are my thoughts on Snoke. They really fumbled it, in my opinion.
I can't dispute that as far as the failed clone of Palpatine. Like that's stupid. That is stupid. And I do agree that Ryan Johnson came in and his entire, you know, MO was let's subvert expectations. We expect Luke to train Rey and have this big arc thing, and he was doing something mysteriously important. Nope, he throws the lightsaber away. Um, you have, Rey. Who is she? Who are her parents? Why is the Force calling out to her? Why is Anakin's lightsaber calling to her? All these things. Oh, it doesn't matter. Now, you could get past that point. Um, clearly Kylo is trying to sway her, bring her over to the side. So that I didn't really this time think, gosh, why did they do that? Because it could be, like, are you really supposed to trust Kylo Ren? Obviously not.
Right.
So I can get past that little bit, but I do agree that like the continuity is too much. Who is Snoke? Snoke is this mysterious guy. Okay, well, what about him? Oh, it doesn't matter. We're gonna kill them all. And then you have to go back and in the third movie, and it's like, okay, well, how do we explain that then? You know?
Right.
Um, but I do agree the cinematography is great. I like the idea of them getting to the salt world. Why can't I remember what the salt world is called?
Crate? Is it
Crate.
crate?
So they get to Crate, and they are, trapped or whatever in this old rebel base, and they're trying to do their best, and they have the fight. I do want to say though that you know one thing that does bother me is that they always seem to have they can never get away from the Death Star idea.
Yes. Yes.
So then they're like, well, we've got this portable little mini Death Star kind of thing so that we can blast through the.
Right.
And it's like, is that all the Empire could do? They had one scientist who came up with a planet destroying, weapon, and now
Hmm.
they're like, let's just make it bigger or smaller. Why don't we put it on a whole bunch of ships? You know?
Exactly.
And it's like, can we not have, you know, some growth? I don't know.
Well, and the thing about the Death Star is it's not a very practical weapon. It's like if you go around destroying all of these planets, you're destroying billions and billions of lives. You don't have an empire left because you've killed everybody.
Right.
So it's like it's not a very practical thing to do. I can understand it um in A New Hope where they use it to um essentially blackmail Leia or coerce Leia into giving up the location of the rebel base, threatening Alderaan. And then they destroy it, and it's like, wow, that nobody's ever done this before. But then it's like, okay, well, you're going to destroy Tatooine because you have a hunch that that's where Luke and Han are, or you're going to destroy every world that you come across. It's like you can't keep destroying these worlds, or else there's nothing left,
Right.
you know? And so again, I disagree with that choice to continue bringing back this world-destroying weapon. It's like it was done. You need to find something else to stand on.
Yeah. See, I can get behind it in Return of the Jedi, where they're like, okay, we had, especially after Rogue One, we, learned that all of that, everything that went into it, and gosh, why am I struggling to say this? He intentionally left a little bit of a flaw so it could, be exploited. And so then they're like, okay, that happened, but the idea of a planet killing machine, it's like the ultimate, nuclear weapon. You don't go to war with someone who can flat out destroy you because they will flat out destroy you.
All
Or
right,
they could.
fair.
They could. That's the idea. It's like you make an example of Alderaan, and then people are like, well, shoot, we better fall in line. And so that's why that's such an integral thing. It's like you destroy the Death Star, they aren't this overwhelming power or whatever. But after the second one, it's like, okay, we didn't even finish building the second one. If we're gonna keep doing this and everyone is just gonna destroy it over and over again, like maybe we should do something else.
Exactly.
But go anyway, that's off topic. Back to Crate. I there are a lot of things I really like, okay? I love that at the end Finn was like, I am going to ram my little stupid ship thing right into he is ready to sacrifice himself for the cause. That's who he should have been from the beginning, but like there he was. So that at the very end, he's willing to die to give his friends and everyone else a chance. That was awesome. The fight with Luke where he's force projecting himself, like that is awesome. That is who Luke should have been the entire friggin' time. There are these really cool elements and things, and I don't understand how they just were like, screw this, you know. And it goes back again and despite me liking the movie and the bare bones of it, it's the characters. It's always back to the characters. If you screw with the characters just to screw with the characters, then there's nothing worth doing, you know? It's like, why are we doing this? If Luke isn't Luke, then what is the point of Star Wars, you know? I don't know. That's that's where I'm kind of get caught up again is it is the characters, man.
It is the characters. And that's what you care about, you know? And it's like these things are cool. Like Luke's force projection, that was, like you said, that was amazing. I thought it was so cool. But why did it take him 2.5 hours to pull his head out of his butt? You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So those are my problems. I could talk about more things that I disliked. I don't like how um pink hair lady, what's her name?
Uh Vice Admiral Holdo or something.
Yes, Holdo. Why did she not tell Poe the plan? He's
Tell
a
them the plan and you're done. Like, okay,
and that
great.
that resolves Poe's plot. You can have
Yeah,
him do something important,
right.
you know, but it's like there's no reason to not tell Poe. There's no reason to keep this a secret. You guys are like dying right now.
Uh-huh.
You are at the end. Why are you not telling the entire crew the plan? You know,
Right.
so again, that was very implausible for me. And I don't think that it even makes sense. So, if we're talking about bare bones of the plot, that's something that I just can't look past because I mean, he's a high-ranking officer. He was a commander before Leia demoted him at the beginning, but he was a commander. He's a leader in the Resistance. Leia's obviously, I don't want to say the word grooming, that usually has a negative connotation, but she's preparing him to become a leader in the Resistance. Why would they not tell him what the plan is? It
Right.
makes no sense at all. So that's another one that I have a hard time looking past.
I mean, yeah. I can't to all of you out there who are looking at this, I don't think that it is any surprise that I was underwhelmed by this. There are things that I like about it having gone back again, but like it's not really a debate at this point because I agree with Zach, and that's fine. There are things, Holdo and Leia, why didn't they just trust Poe? What's wrong with that? Snoke shouldn't have been so easy to kill. Rose. What why did they bring Rose into this and throw the whole Finn Rey plot out? And they're like, okay, well, let's introduce Rose, and Rose falls in love with Finn, and she's weird, and it's weird, and like, why did the Phasma fight suck? Why do the lightsabers suck again, Zach? All of this stuff,
I know. I know.
like
They they specifically did not rehire the guy who choreographed the lightsaber fights for the prequels. And the undisputed opinion of the prequels is that the lightsaber fights are incredible because they are.
they are.
Why would they not bring him back? It's the one thing that everybody throughout Star Wars agrees on about the prequels.
Yeah.
And they didn't bring him back. And it shows because the lightsabers fights, they suck. They do suck.
I,
Now that being said, I do think the fight between Kylo Ren, Rey, and the guards, I mean, it was a cool spectacle, but it would have been, I don't know. It doesn't showcase Kylo Ren's skills again. Again, he gets bested by Rey, who's been training for less than half a film,
yeah.
you know. And I think if we can move on into our reforging
Yes.
portion, I think the first thing that needs to happen is I think you have Finn go and find Rey. I think you have something where it's been too long. Rey's been gone for too long. They haven't heard from her. And so Finn, you know, follows their coordinates, right? Because obviously they would have written down the coordinates of where Rey was, where Luke was.
Right.
I think Rey or Finn goes to find Rey again because that's who he cares about. He cares about Rey. And you find out that, hey, Finn is force sensitive because that's what they were alluding to in The Rise of Skywalker anyway, was that, yeah, it turns out that Finn is force sensitive. And so you have them both train. And maybe the conflict that you have is that Finn is getting along better with Luke than Rey does. And, the things that Luke tries to teach Rey, they kind of butt heads a little bit. And maybe that's because she is a Palpatine, you know? Um, you can have Rey and Kylo Ren have their dyad in the Force, but have that negatively affect Rey's relationship with Luke. He's trying to teach her the way that he was taught, or the way that the ancient Jedi texts teach, and it doesn't fit with her Palpatine heritage.
Hmm.
And you can have that kind of a conflict, but then it's coming so easily to Finn, right? And then at the end, I think what you do is you have a battle between Finn and Rey and Kylo Ren. The 2-on-1, kind of a Dooku versus Obi-Wan and Anakin, except they actually fight together instead of just going in and having to fight one-on-one type thing.
Right.
Um, as far as the getting stuck in space and tracking the fleet, fine, I'll let it happen. But you need to have a better plan than, well, we're not going to tell Finn what's going on, and he needs to learn to trust his superiors, and at the end, we're all going to leave, and Holdo's going to light speed into the ship. And that's another thing. It's it's visually striking when that happens, but it doesn't make any sense. Because if you could do that, why had it never been done before?
Right.
It's like, why didn't they do that for the Death Stars? Like it just some of these things don't quite make sense to me. So I think you take that out, no matter how visually striking it is, you take it out, and you can have the same idea, but just have her do a frontal assault at the First Order fleet and sacrifice herself for them to get down to the planet, right? Instead of this thing that doesn't make sense. Um, and then the last thing is Luke. You can't have Luke be who he is. So I think what you do is you can still have him be secluded, but have him trying to communicate with Obi-Wan again. Maybe when Kylo Ren turns to the dark side um and Luke has to fight him, it causes a conflict within himself, and he can't use the Force the way that he wanted to. And so he goes in search of this ancient place, and he's reading these ancient texts, and he's trying to contact Obi-Wan or Yoda, and he can't. Like something to give him a purpose, rather than just, yeah, I'm pouting. It's no, he can be gone for those 5, 6 years or whatever, but have him trying to regain something that he lost. And, I think that would be a more compelling reason for him to be gone. And maybe you can weave that into the Rey and him clashing because he can't really teach her all that well, and she gets frustrated.
Hmm.
And I mean there are tons of possibilities, but I think the best idea for reconciling why Luke was secluding himself on um, Octu
Yeah.
is to have him trying to regain his force sensibilities, right? And granted, this example that I'm going to cite came after The Last Jedi, but in the game Jedi Fallen Order, you have Seer Junda, who was a Jedi Master, and she was captured by the Inquisitors and tortured. She saw that they tortured her apprentice and turned her to the dark side, and Seer loses it, uses the dark side of the Force, breaks out of the prison, and that was so incongruous with who she was that she lost her ability to use the Force. And it wasn't until later in the game that she finally regained it, right?
Yeah.
And I think you can do something like that for Luke. He had to fight his student, his nephew, someone that he loved, and it was too in conflict with his character. And so he loses his abilities, and he has to go and retrain himself and look through these old texts to see if this has ever happened before and that sort of thing, rather than just, yeah, I'm pouting. I'm pouting because Kylo Ren killed all my students and I failed.
Yeah.
So that was a long-winded response, and I'm not sure it was very chronological or coherent. But what do you think?
All right. So let's go back to the beginning. At the end of at the end of Force Awakens, Rey is on Octu. She goes and she finds Luke. You see that her handing the lightsaber thing, right? That's
Right.
where we end off. And um, I like the idea of that still happening. Luke is there for a reason. They have some sort of conflict or whatever. I can get behind that. The Finn arc. I do wish they had done something more with Finn. Um, and so I am down at the same time for him going to learn from Luke as well. They find out he's force sensitive. They're alluding to that, It would be awesome. The Now this is just a nitpicky question. How much time passed in between the end of whatever and um The Last Jedi? How much time has passed since they blew up planet Death Star number 3?
That is a good question. Um, it says here is The Force Awakens happens in 34 ABY, and so does The Last Jedi. So it's like no significant time gap.
All right, so I think that's a mistake. How much I don't remember how much time, occurred in between um I don't remember how much, occurred in between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, but there is quite a bit of time. And I don't, you know, like I said, I don't know how much time that was, but it was enough.
Hmm.
You need more time, especially if you're going to train, Rey and Finn. Um, because if all of this is happening in like a 36-hour, 48-hour window, like what are we even doing,
I know.
What does it matter if anyone has force powers or whatever? Like, why is Luke crying when he can teach someone in 2 days how to be a Jedi? Or, I don't know. It's just stupid. Um, I don't like that. So anyway, extend the time period a little bit. You can have them jumping around like they do. That's what happened in The Empire Strikes Back, you know, from one base to another base to another base. Um, they're the rebellion, they're the resistance. I still hate that name more than
I do
anything.
too. I do too.
But I'm more interested in, all right, Zach, we could fix it based on we um what we wish it had been. No, that's not what I meant. Um, I'm more interested in saying, okay, what would we do if we had done our Force Awakens? How would we have continued that? Can you remember what our, Force Awakens was? How you wanted to fix that?
Well, we talked about having a three-way conflict for um essentially the government of the galaxy, right? We talked about
Right.
having good and bad people on both sides to
Hmm.
make it more interesting rather than just a simple First Order is obviously bad and the not resistance
Right.
is good. But I can't remember where we ended our Force Awakens.
I can't remember either, but I feel like the battle was trying to sway one of the groups to join either the rebellion or no, not the rebellion, the New
New
Republic or
Republic.
the remnants of the Empire. So you have some sort of like cartel organization or the Hutts takeover or something that you're trying to do that. And the conflict comes when the rebellion is trying to um or the rebellion. I keep calling them the rebellion because that's who they are to me. But the
That's
New
who it is.
Republic um goes and attacks when they find out that the cartels and the Empire are going to work together or something. And so you have this not three-way battle, but a battle trying to sabotage all of that. I believe that was kind of our idea. And so you've got that happening, and that's when Kylo and Rey have their showdown, and Finn. Um, they're still trying to find Luke, so you've got to add that in there a little bit, I guess. But um, did we decide Luke was going to be gone? No, we didn't. We wanted Luke and Leia to be the leaders of the New Republic.
We did.
So we get rid of the whole Luke arc anyway. Um, but I kind of like the idea of ending it in just chaos, you know.
Hmm.
You don't really know. It's not like at the end of A New Hope, they blow up the Death Star and everyone's happy and it's all wonderful, you know. Like maybe
There are
it's a
no
lot
medals
more,
being given,
uh-huh. It's a lot messier, you know.
right?
So start from there. We've got this messy conflict that ends, um, and that's where, in my opinion, you figure out Rey is force sensitive, Finn is force sensitive. They both kind of, you know, attacked Kylo Ren, and somehow they made um, you know, they took someone who was trained in the force and was able to hold their own for a little bit, and then Luke shows up, and I think Luke showing up forces not even that there's a conflict. It forces Kylo to retreat. Then Luke decides we've got to train Rey and Finn. I think
Mhm.
that's where we start.
And I think that's fine. My proposal then, and this is just an idea that's still forming, but I think what you do is you have Rey, Finn, and Luke then go on their own side quest in the next film and have them searching for some Jedi artifact, or they're searching for, ancient Sith artifacts that will give them more information about Snoke and where he comes from. Um, or maybe they're looking for the Star Forge. I don't know. But I think the way that you handle that is you have them traveling the galaxy together, training sort of on the job type thing. And I think that would be a compelling way to begin their training. Um, as far as the backdrop, the political side of things, I'm not sure where you take it. Um, we mentioned about the Force Awakens that it would be interesting to have Snoke pulling the strings of all three organizations somehow. And I
Hmm.
think you keep that going and kind of allude more to it, and you have questions about loyalty on the sides of the Republic and, all that kind of stuff. But I don't know. I haven't really considered it. I think we ought to have a whole episode where we talk about how we would reforge the entire trilogy.
Just the trilogy or the entire series?
I mean, we could do the whole series, but I don't think I have much to change about the prequels or the original trilogy.
Well, the problem that we have is and maybe this is way too far. It's okay, Zach, you are put in as the head of Lucasfilms, and your goal is to take all of the content that we have currently and find some way to make it work. You
Oh, okay. I
can't
see
get
what you
rid of
mean.
everything. So this is in the future something that we should do. But like think about it this way. You can't get rid of things like the Acolyte or, you know, like you have to keep the Mandalorian stuff in there. You have to keep Tales of the Jedi. You have to keep all of this stuff. How do you
Shoehorn it back around to fix
shoehorn
it.
it all back around so that everything in there makes sense? You have some overall power that is guiding everything, Or I don't know. You know what I mean? Like
I do. I
take
do.
everything and fix it.
I I think we should do both.
Okay.
I think we should talk about how we would have done the sequel trilogy and what we would do to moving forward from this point in time, make everything work again.
Yeah. All right. I think we will. But to recap, we're running out of time. To recap what we decided here, the reforging section, um, why don't you recap what you wanted to reforge? Fixing
Okay.
the Force, not the Force Awakens, the Last Jedi, based on we're just trying to fit it into the Force Awakens.
So you have Finn wake up and it's been 5 months, 6 months. It's been too long and he's worried about Rey. Nobody's heard from Rey. So Finn goes to find Rey. That's where you start. The Resistance, I'll let you have the same kind of plot point. The First Order has found their base and they're trying to evacuate. That's why it's difficult for Finn to get away and go find Reyes because it's like, no, you can't go anywhere. We need everybody here type deal, right? And you can keep all of that the same. But Rey or Finn goes to find Rey. Luke has been trying to teach Rey for 6 months, and they've been batting heads, right? He has lost his force sensitiveness, or it's diminished because of what happened with Kylo Ren. You find out that, it wasn't that Luke ignited his lightsaber to kill Kylo Ren. Kylo Ren left, comes back as, or Ben Solo left and comes back as Kylo Ren with the Knights of Ren, and Luke has to fight them. And maybe he kills one of the Knights of Ren who maybe were another student, and that's enough to break him down, and he gets overwhelmed, right? And that's his backstory. You have Finn come and he synergizes more with Luke than Rey does. Rey gets upset, starts looking for comfort in Kylo Ren. She goes off to find him, or they both go off to fight him, something along that side. And then you have um, a big fight between Kylo Ren and Rey and Finn, and have an actual two versus one, sort of like Darth Maul in The Phantom Menace, how you have two Jedi Knights and he's almost toying with them.
Hmm.
And I think if you really want to add some weight to Kylo Ren as a villain, you need to show that he can take on two people at once. Or maybe it's just that Rey and Finn are so much in their infancy as Jedi that he's just toying with them, right?
Still, he
So,
needs some skill.
right. So I think that's how you kind of take it as far as that goes. I don't know what you do with Poe. You can kind of keep the basic arc. I think that's fine. Um, but you can't kill off Snoke. You can't kill off Snoke. You have to have him come in and maybe reverse it to where, instead of having Luke force project and save the day fooling Kylo Ren, you have Snoke coming in and dropping the hammer to destroy the resistance, and then they barely get away. A lot of them die, that sort of thing, you know. And you need to figure out what you're doing with Snoke. You need to decide if he's Plagueis or not. You need to figure out his backstory and that sort of thing. But um, I think that's where I would take it if we had to follow The Force Awakens.
I kind of like the idea of instead of Snoke or instead of Kylo Ren and the force projection there, is that what you mean? Like instead
Mm.
of Luke force projecting to Kylo, he's projecting in front of Snoke? Is that what you're thinking?
No, no, I'm saying no force projection from Luke, at least at this point. And instead of Luke coming and saving the day, you have Snoke coming and destroying everything.
And they just
So,
barely get
and
away.
they barely get away.
All right.
Barely
Yeah.
get away. Maybe you have Luke come in and fight against Snoke and he loses. I don't know. But show some power from Snoke. That was another missed opportunity.
Yeah. I agree. All right. Well, let's leave it there. We're about out of time. What do you guys think? What would you have changed? How would you have fixed The Last Jedi based on, The Force Awakens? What would you do? And how would you have set things up for the last movie? Um, Drop a comment, like, share, and we will be back next time.